President.
The senator from Sherman, Senator Billinger.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. Senate Ways and Means will meet at 1 o'clock in our normal room on the 5th floor. Thank you.
Are there other announcements? Senator from Johnson, Senator Warren.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. Senate Judiciary Committee will meet today at 12:30 p.m. in our usual meeting room, 346 South, and on the agenda is SB 286 regarding COVID-19 business relief. Thank you.
Are there other announcements? Seeing none, the chair recognizes the leader from Cali, Senator Alley.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. Fed and State today will meet at 1 o'clock to consider appointments we heard earlier. And we will have Republicans will have a caucus this afternoon, or this morning at 10:45. 10:45 caucus this morning. The Republicans will meet in their normal room at 5:48. And I yield to the good senator from Douglas, Senator Francisco.
Senator from Douglas, Senator Francisco.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. The Senate Democrats will caucus upon recess in our regular room, 287 North. I yield back to the senator from Cowley.
Senator Alley.
Mr. Vice President, I yield to Senator Warren.
Thank you, Mr. Assistant Majority Leader. The Judiciary Conference Committee will be meeting tomorrow, Tuesday at 8 a.m. We don't yet have a room confirmed, but we will get a room, so that would be Judiciary Conference Committee meeting tomorrow at 8 a.m. Thank you. Senator
from Cali, Senator Alley.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. I move the Senate recess until 10:45, and we'll be in caucus.
You have heard the motion. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. The motion carried. The Senate is, just a moment here. Senator from Cali, Senator Alley, do you need to make a correction?
Mr. Vice President, we will caucus at 10:45, back on the floor at 2 o'clock.
Thank you. Is that all clear?
One more time.
Senator Alley.
Thank you. We will caucus at 10:45, back on the floor at 11:15. And then...
Is that clear? Would you repeat that one more time, please?
We will caucus at 10:45 in our normal rooms. We'll be back on the floor at 11:15.
We have had the motion to recess and it has been approved. The Senate is recessed. The Senate will come to order. The chair recognizes the senator from Lynn, Senator Tyson.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. The veto message of the governor having been read, I move Senate Bill 50 be passed wait a minute. You want an explanation first?
That's your choice to follow up or right now.
I'm going to make the motion first.
Okay.
And then I will follow up with an explanation. So I will continue with the motion. Having been read, I move that Senate Bill 50 be passed, notwithstanding the governor's veto. Senate Bill 50, this body, legislative body, passed it early in session, dealing with Marketplace Facilitator. And for those of you that aren't aware of it, what that does, currently in Kansas law, if you buy something or purchase something and do not online and do not pay sales tax, and it's not sales tax exempt, then you are obligated on that sales tax. And there is a line on your income tax form that you are supposed to be paying that sales tax. What this Marketplace Facilitator would do is third-party online businesses would be required to collect that sales tax and remit it to the state of Kansas. There is a $100,000 threshold that follows the Wayfair lawsuit, and the House kept this position in Senate Bill 50. Then they made several amendments to the bill and included items that this body had seen in Senate Bill 22 as it was passed out of the Senate Tax Committee. So it allows the taxpayer the options to itemize on their Kansas return. In 2017, the federal government cut taxes, and as a result, it inadvertently increased taxes for some Kansans. We have been trying to deal with this topic for several years. The governor has vetoed now 3 bills dealing with this topic. The standard deduction on the federal government was increased to $25,000. Most Kansans can't reach that threshold. So if you cannot itemize on your federal tax return, you cannot itemize on your state tax return. This would allow you the option to itemize starting for tax year 2021. It also increases the standard deduction by $500. So for example, if you're married filing jointly, it would increase to $8,000. It would increase by $500. It would increase to $3,500 for singles filing individual. And this again starts in tax year 2021. Beginning in 2021, it also addresses other items that were in the federal tax code. The GILTI that we've heard about, we've heard that this is a major tax cut for corporations. I would dispute that. This is money that Kansas has not seen. The federal government passed a law to encourage corporations to bring money home, offshore money to the United States. This would encourage that money to come to Kansas. Over 20 other states have passed legislation dealing with this topic, and this would help make Kansas competitive for that money to come home. Disallowed business interest is also included, capital contributions, FDIC premiums, and also that changed in the federal law this year is to allow meal deductions. This would also allow meal deductions on Kansas tax returns of those that itemize. It extends the expensing deduction for all taxpayers, which is currently available for corporations. So again, just helping create a fair and level playing field. It also changes the Kansas corporation filing deadlines to 30 days after the federal deadline. It extends the Kansas net operating rating loss carry forward from 10 years to indefinite. It clarifies that victims of identity theft do not owe income tax when their identity was stolen for unemployment. With that, Mr. Vice President, I'd stand for questions.
You have heard the motion. Are there any questions? Before we go, yes, the senator from Douglas, Senator Francisco.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I do have questions if the senator from Lynn would stand for them.
Senator Tyson.
I will, thank you.
One point that was made regarding decoupling was that taxes on Kansans have increased. Do we know if that increase was for their overall taxes, or was that just an increase in the portion of taxes paid to Kansas but offset by the larger standard deduction at the federal level?
Senator from Lynn, Senator Tyson.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. I'm not sure I understand the question. If she's asking, it was an increase for those that were no longer allowed to itemize, for some.
Senator from Douglas, Senator Francisco.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. I understand that the increase in the amount paid to Kansas might have been a result of that change in the federal level. But overall, did Kansans see their taxes go up or go down? Because many people who were itemizing now got a significantly higher opportunity at the federal level, I guess a significantly lower federal tax bill.
Senator from Lynn, do you care to respond?
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. I would ask the good senator, it sounds to me like she is trying to say that if you get a tax cut at the federal level, we should be allowed to increase it at the state level?
Senator from Douglas, Senator Francisco, do you care to respond?
Thank you, Mr. Vice President, I would. I'm not saying that we should. I'm just saying that people are making decisions about itemizing based on the, usually the bottom line for their taxes. So in some cases, people did not take an itemized deduction in Kansas because it was better for them overall to take the standard deduction at the federal level. And I think that situation has only increased. But the other question that I had for the senator was, do we know how many Kansans who previously would have taken the standard deduction because it made sense at the federal level, how many more Kansans would now be able to itemize, and what is that fiscal note to our state?
Senator, is that question directed at the carrier of the bill, the senator from Lynn, Senator Tyson?
It is.
Senator Lynn?
Thank you.
Senator Tyson, excuse me.
No, that's fine. Thank you, Mr. Vice President. I would respond that the estimate from revenue is approximately $82 million. And what's interesting on this is the fiscal note is $94 million estimated in 2022. This is by the Department of Revenue. And the standard deduction is $82.9 million. So I would also challenge everybody to look at this when they keep saying that this is a corporate income tax bill. Majority that are going to be taking their standard deductions are not corporations. They are small businesses. They are people like you and I. There are neighbors, our teachers, our firemen, our local Kansans that will have the option to itemize. Instead, they inadvertently saw a tax increase on their state income tax because they are no longer able to itemize. It kind of reminds me of 2012. When we passed that tax cut bill, there was one major concern that I had in there, and it became a fact But if you had a loss, you were a small business and you had a loss, you actually had to add that back and pay income tax on the loss. But if you had a profit, you did not pay income tax. And it took me years to convince colleagues and everyone, and we got it changed and we got it corrected, and that was wonderful. And so this is a similar situation. It's been since 2017. We've worked on this since 2018, 2019. 20 we got cut short. But here we are in 21. We are telling our colleagues that this has been an unintended tax increase for Kansans because of actions of the federal government. So we need to allow the option to itemize and allow these small businesses and small mom and pops to be able to we engineer behavior with our tax code. I've said that several times, I'll keep saying it. And so this way, their behavior will line up for their federal and state tax returns.
Senator from Douglas, Senator Francisco.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. I appreciate the responses. I'm concerned that we really don't have the mechanism in our Department of Revenue to audit these taxes. I think it will certainly be costly to make this change. I'm pleased that in the bill there was an increase in the standard deduction. I think that that is a much better way to approach this tax issue. I think there's some other questions regarding the bill, but I would, again, much prefer to see a higher standard deduction than decoupling. Thank you.
Senator from Riley, Senator Hawk.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. I'm going to be a no on this motion, and my intention is to sustain the governor's veto. I'd like to share my thinking about this. Overall, my biggest concern, probably every year, and especially since the pandemic, is to have a sustainable budget. I'm afraid this tax bill, Senate Bill 50, went too far. It does blow a hole in our budget. Estimates of some over $300 million in terms of its costs. We have several things that we have yet to look at in Ways and Means as we get to our final omnibus budget. We have several other items there. We've yet to fund K-12. We haven't funded the Judiciary. We haven't looked fairly at potential salary raises at a fairly frugal amount. Last week, I heard that we have another problem brewing, and that's with maintenance of effort on our federal relief dollars, a thing we often call as CARES, the CRISA and ARPA, that we have not maintained our effort in funding higher ed. We may need to put as much as $106 million into our higher ed budget in order not to lose our funding on K-12 or have to pay back some of those federal relief dollars. There are a lot of needs that we have. Again, I worry that we seem to always flirt with the same problem we had with the last recession in 2008 when we came back and gave tax cuts, and then our state did not recover as rapidly as those around us. I think we have the potential to have a good recovery. We're seeing some good signs of that now. I think by sustaining the governor's veto and voting no on this motion, I am hopefully keeping the door open for a potential more reasonable tax policy on this. Thank you.
Are there any other questions?
May I respond, Mr. Vice President?
Yes, Senator from Lynn, Senator Tyson.
Thank you. I'm so glad the senator brought this up. I've been shouting for several weeks, in fact, several months. Most of you have probably heard it. Our revenues have been up for the year. fact, the first 7 months, we were up by, I think it was 170, 180 million. The last revenue that came in, we're up $232.8 million above estimates. So if you would listen to the last speech, you would think, oh, gloom and doom. Oh my, what are we gonna do? We aren't gonna be able to pay our bills. We are collecting more taxes in this state than we ever have. In fact, I don't think this bill goes far enough. But it is a bill that we can get passed and we can get supermajority. So I ask that you stand with me and stand for your taxpayers and your constituents in supporting this legislation.
Senator from Lyons, Senator Longvine.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. I appreciate the opportunity to speak a little bit on this. This day's been 3 years in the making. I applaud the tax chair for her work and her willingness to stick with this. This is a critical bill. And last year when I was on the tax committee, I appreciated the work that the committee did. The reality of it is this bill corrects a huge injustice to our middle income taxpayers. I know the bill has been characterized as a tax break for the rich. It couldn't be further from the truth. This is something that will restore tax fairness to our W-2 wage earners. It is not a tax break for the rich because the rich generally have the ability to get to the federal exemption, and if they don't, they'll buy a piece of equipment, they'll buy a piece of property, they'll do whatever they need to do because they have the income and the ability to do that. Farmers, LLC owners can go, once again, buy a piece of equipment, 179 it, and get to that federal exemption. Those that are on W-2s don't have that ability generally, and so if you take an average family, I don't care, take a couple of school teachers. Let's say they have $12,000 in mortgage expense throughout the year, $5,000 in property tax. They've given a couple $1,000s away in charitable contributions to their church and other charities. And oh, by the way, they had a baby that year, and they spent $2,000 in medical expense. Well, that's $19,000 that under current law they cannot deduct that they previously could deduct. That income makes a huge difference to our W-2 wage earner families, and so I strongly support and urge the body to vote to override the veto on Senate Bill 50.
Senator from Johnson, Senator Sykes.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. I am going to be voting no, and I'm going to ask you to sustain this veto. My colleague from Riley was very helpful. We haven't even discussed education. It's not in our funding, and here we're going to offer a tax bill that is irresponsible, and the proposal that blows over $307 million hole in our state general fund, not including the 106 to higher education that we need to fund. This is not the last train out, and I've been talking to many of you over the break about a compromise tax bill, one that would provide real relief. Increasing our standard deduction by more than $500. That $500 increase is going to save $28 on the average Kansan's taxes. I don't know about you, but I have 2 teenage boys that won't even buy one pizza at a local pizza place in my district. But we can have that compromise if we sustain this veto. Last Friday, the U.S. Department of Education held a federal funding question call for the states, and we are out of compliance by $106 million. There is, I think all of you received this memo, and there's a way that we can hopefully get around this with $53 million split between 2 years moving forward and asking for an exception to this. passing a bill that's $300 million in tax funds or tax credits while asking for us to help fund our public education, I think they're going to see through us. And we're going to be paying back that dollars, and we're putting at risk all federal funds for our schools. I do think we can have tax relief. I think we can do local ad valorem. I think we can raise the standard deduction. Look at food sales tax. But that starts by sustaining this veto. So I ask you all to vote no.
Mr. Vice President, I'd like to.
Senator from Lynn, or Dyson.
Thank you. Mr. Vice President, it's so interesting the way data can be presented. And I know that because I work a lot in IT, and you know, for those of you that don't know, I do have a math degree, and you can make it look however you want. And when the minority leader says $300 million, again, oh, that fear tactic. It's $94 million for FY22. It's $93.8 million for FY23. It's approximately $96 million for FY24, okay? They're using the same methodology that was used in 2017. We had never before combined years when we were talking taxes. We would talk each individual year. But when it came to reversing the tax cuts from 2012, all of a sudden we started coupling years together to get that number. So I just want everybody to be clear. It's less than $100 million each year. And a majority of it goes to the taxpayers. At first they were saying it was corporations that was getting all this. Well, that's not even close to accurate. You can see that from the numbers. So this is just good policy, good legislation.
Senator from Johnson, Senator Olson.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. It was 3 or 4 years ago when the tax bill was done. I'm going to support this wholeheartedly. I love it. The tax increase that was done when the Trump tax bill passed. It increased the standard deduction. I think it's this year $24,700 or $24,800. Back then, the standard deduction was, I believe, $12,400, and they could start itemizing at $12,400. When he increased it to $24,000 under his legislation, his tax proposal, that was an increase on all the Kansas taxpayers because we did not decouple from the feds. We increased their taxes that year in the state of Kansas. Yes, this is a tax cut for them people. We're giving them back what they used to be able to do. Itemize at $12,000, I guess it'll be this year, $12,400 or $800. They'll be able to start itemizing. So the people at the bottom, that $12,000 range, they'll be able to itemize up to. Now they can't. You know, I love increasing the standard deduction. That helps the people at the bottom. So does this. This helps the same people that now, as you just heard the senator that sits next to me, that has the charitable contribution, that has the property, that has all the deductions to itemize. I don't get this, why we didn't do it 3 years ago. I guess some people thought we needed the revenue, but it was a tax increase when we did it then. We need to fix this and allow them to itemize like they were. If we would have done it that year, there probably shouldn't have been a fiscal note because they'd be able to have what they had the year before, be able to itemize at $12,400. This is a no-brainer. Thank you.
Senator from Butler, Senator Masterson.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. A couple quick things. Obviously, I see a need to override this veto. Few things this bill does not do. It does not blow a hole in our budget. I know that's the contention. And then I heard we haven't even discussed education. We did. Some of you may not remember the discussion. We discussed fully funding completely GovRec, but because there was some parental choice in that bill, the decision was no. But we've discussed it. Not to mention, there is $1 billion estimated to come in from the federal government directly to K-12 with a B in addition. So, and all because some of us may live in districts where you can't buy a $28 pizza, doesn't mean you shouldn't help the constituents that don't. This bill helps almost every Kansan through standard deduction. It fixes serious issues that happened that became tax increases, I think well described by Senator from Lyon as an injustice. Fixes an issue with sales tax. Really protects people from being subject to fraud. And after CRE, it's a very modest fiscal note. And I think it all honestly be described as the least we could do at this point. So I ask for your vote. Thank you.
Senator from Finney, Senator Dahl.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have a couple of questions for the carrier, if she would take the questions.
Senator from Lynn, Senator Tyson.
Yes, I will. Thank you.
Since before the decoupling came, that was around 2017, correct?
Senator Lynn.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. The federal tax cuts were passed in 2017.
You may proceed, Senator Dahl.
Thank you. Can you tell me approximately how many Kansans used the standard reduction prior to 2017?
Senator Tyson.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. I don't have that data with me. I inadvertently left it in my office. If he wants, I can go down and get it.
Senator Dahl.
No, that's fine. And I'm just trying to, this has been several years ago since I've looked at this, but I think it was around 14% or 15%. Would that sound in the ballpark?
Senator Tyson.
I know that it's between 10 and 15%. It's been that through the years. Yes, that sounds correct.
Senator Dahl.
Okay, and since 17, when we could decouple, we have about 6 or 7% that now do standard reductions. Does that sound correct?
Senator Tyson.
I do not remember that number. As I said, I can look it up or go get it.
Okay.
Senator Dahl, would you like to?
Yeah, I appreciate that. And so what we're talking about in reality is about maybe 10% of the Kansas population that will benefit from Senate Bill 50 on the exemptions. Would that sound correct?
Senator Tyson, you care to respond?
I think according to revenue, what the good senator's asking is a snapshot of how many people would be able to itemize on their tax returns, which that is part of the question. But the other part of the question is, how much money does that leave in the taxpayer's pocket so that they have disposable income or are able to pay their bills? And that is a dynamic picture instead of a static. We should be getting those dynamic numbers, and we have not. In fact, when I first started, there was a software system that was told that it would produce the dynamic numbers, because you can't just look, as I spoke before, approximately 82.9 million, 83.7 million, 84.8 million over the next 3 years. So that's money that's going to come back into the Kansas economy, not be used to grow government.
Senator Dahl.
And I appreciate that. And any money that we can get back into the pocket of our taxpayers, I think is a good thing. I'm just curious about the route. It's not a secret that I have been a proponent of the LATVR for quite some time. It's in policy. It's $54 million that goes to every Kansan, or could go to every Kansan. The counties would decide that, in property tax relief. And so I agree with the good senator from Lynn that we do need to reduce taxes as much as possible, put money into the pocket of our constituents. I mean, that benefits the whole economy altogether. I'm just wondering if we're doing it the wrong way. I was fortunate enough in my, prior to coming here, I was in city government, and we had great development that happened in Garden City during the time that I was there. Just happened to be lucky, be at right place, right time. And when these developers would come in, we had a lot of them come in. Each and every one of them didn't talk, not one, talked about income tax. Every single developer, everybody that was coming to try to start a new business or whatever wanted some type of property tax relief or were concerned about property tax. So if we truly, truly want to grow business and truly want to put more money into the pockets of our citizens, I think that we need to look at property tax. And LATVR is right there. It's already in policy. I could support this if we could bring $54 million and fund something that's been on the books forever. We just haven't funded it since 2002. It could make me a lot more acceptable to this bill. Thank you.
Senator from Johnson, Senator Sykes.
May I respond?
Excuse me, Senator Tyson, I apologize. You may respond.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. I will get those numbers. I'll call down and get them. But what I would like to respond to is I'm so glad the senator brought up the LAVTR, the $54 million. Because if we look at it, the 1.5 mil that the state collects is approximately $58 million. So if we got rid of that 1.5 mil state property tax instead of LAVTR, that would be a true property tax cut for every Kansan that owns property and owns a vehicle in the state of Kansas. So I think that would be much smarter than just sending it back to the counties. Just use it to pay for that 1.5 mil and be true property tax relief for our taxpayers.
Senator from Johnson, Senator Sykes.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. Just a couple things. Again, not to beat a dead horse, but $300 million, it's only $300 million. We're gonna get $1 billion in federal dollars. This bill is setting us up for fraud. We do not have the system in place. We thought our unemployment claims fraud that we were getting there was outrageous. Just wait until we have no mechanism to audit all of these tax returns that are coming through. We talk about it's only $300 million. You know what? We are spending $336 million more in financial year 22 than we're bringing in. And now we're looking at $106 million. Let's sustain this veto, and then let's have an honest conversation about how to provide tax relief for all Kansans that does not bust our budget. Thank you.
Senator from, Senator Pittman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to make a note to this body. This bill puts me in an uncomfortable position because I happen to disagree with the governor's position on this as a member of her caucus, and it makes me very uncomfortable to be in that position. I've voted for decoupling the standardized deduction in the House, and I supported it this time around. I do believe we should be increasing some of the standardized deduction to help the lower income individuals. And if you look at the numbers here, you'll see Leavenworth County is one of the highest percentages of folks that can take advantage of this. It's an interesting little diagram there. Johnson County and Miami are the only ones that go above our county. And then the western side of Wyandotte obviously has a lot of folks in that middle income bracket. So I get it, and I do agree with it. Despite some of the arguments and rhetoric I've heard, I'm very supportive. But I am standing here to commend the governor at this point for taking a look at the overarching budget. And while it might not blow a hole through the entire budget, it is a hole. It is a place where revenue is not going to help satisfy some of the goals of state government, which is to provide great education, great safety, great roads. And the governor has taken a holistic point of view at this. She could have used this as a political tool and said, I support this, we're going to throw some money out there, and that's going to help me become governor again. No, she's taken a fiscally responsible look. While I don't agree with this particular piece, I respect the fact that she's done that, and I respect that it's a very, very difficult position to balance the budget and to provide for all the state entities and to put it together in a way that works for all Kansans. So just putting that out there that I do respect her goals on that, and that might explain the way I vote on this.
Senator from Lynn, Senator Tyson, you care to respond? Seeing no other questions, we are now ready for final action. I will give an explanation. A yes vote is to override the veto. A no vote is to sustain the veto. Again, a yes vote is to override the veto. We are ready for final action. The clerk will call the roll.
Alley. Baumgardner. Bellinger. Bowers. Plays. Orson. Dietrich. Dahl. Erickson. Bag. House Godot. Francisco. Gossage. Haley. Hawk. Hildebrand. Holland. Holscher. Hershin. Cluse. Longbine. Masterson. McGinn. Olson. O'Shea. Peck. Peterson. Petty. Pittman. Kyle. Breichman. Steffen. Straub. Sullentrop. Sykes. Thompson. Tyson. Ware. Warren. Wilborn.
Has every senator had the opportunity to vote? Yes, the senator from Lynn, Senator Tyson.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. Preliminary vote count, please.
Yes. The preliminary count is 30 yeas, 10 nays. Does any senator wish to explain their vote? The clerk will close the roll and tally the vote. 30 having voted in favor and 10 against, a 2/3 constitutional majority, having voted in favor of overriding the governor's veto on Senate Bill 50, the motion prevails and the bill passes.
Look, you got good notes, and Paul don't got a damn note.
The chair now recognizes the senator from Sedgwick, Senator Erickson.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. SB 55, the Fairness in Women's Sports Act, ensures that biological females have a fair opportunity to play and excel in sports. Despite how it's being framed in the media and from the opposition, this bill simply ensures a level playing field for girl athletes. Either you accept the science or you don't. Either you support equal opportunities for women or you don't. Today is the chance to stand and do what's right by Kansas girls and women. Thank you, Mr. Vice President.
Would you make the motion, please?
The veto message of the governor having been read, I move SB 55 be passed, notwithstanding the governor's veto.
You have heard the motion and explanation. Are there any questions? Senator from Johnson, Senator Petty.
I think the Senator from Butler was up before me. I'll yield to him first.
Senator from Butler, Senator Masterson.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. Since you recognize Senator from Wyandotte first, I'm glad to yield.
Senator from Wyandotte, Senator Petty.
Someone back here, so we need a coin toss. Would the senator from Cedric stand for a question?
She will. Senator Erickson.
Thank you. This a piece of legislation, could you remind us again what the age group that this covers?
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. Yes, elementary through college.
Senator Petty.
Thank you. And that's kindergarten through college, isn't it?
Mr. Vice President, yes, that's correct.
And I would remind the body, I think it's very important to keep in mind, this piece of legislation is so discriminatory. And we're talking about 5-year-olds and addressing 5-year-olds and what kinds of sports they can participate in. This is not only in school, but it's intramurals as well. It's intramurals, and that anyone could suggest that a 5-year-old through college could be transgender. You know, in the state of Kansas, we have a system in place for our high school sports, and they have a process in place for determining the eligibility of students. And interestingly enough, that no time in discussion of this legislation was there any kind of opinion thrown out that somehow the Kansas Athletic Association was not doing their job. And that's because they have been. They have a process in place dealing with transgender children, and it's working. In fact, only 5 students have been identified that are participating in sports, and of those, 4 of them are transgender males. So we're not really even talking about transgender females when it comes to our sports. But we are talking about, but it is a piece of legislation that can be bullying and discriminatory to our children in Kansas. And I think that's so important to keep in place when we as a body have said that we don't want to see bullying, we don't want to see discrimination of our children. And we do want them to feel that within our educational system that every child is valued. So I'm always concerned when we have legislation before us that seems to be a solution in search of a problem. And that's exactly what Senate Bill 55 is.
Senator from Butler, Senator Masterson.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. You know, when I first brought this issue forward, I did not see it at all as controversial. I thought it was made that way for political advantage. And to bring up things like 5-year-olds in this context is nothing short of tragic distraction from the issue. And actually, over the break, I was glad to see Caitlyn Jenner, probably the most famous transgendered person in the country, probably the world, come out and make the exact same statements that I made right here. It's just about fairness. There's an advantage to biological boys, quote, unquote. There is nothing discriminatory. I take it back. There is something discriminatory, but it's against that little girl or that college woman. That is the discrimination. I think what runs around in people's mind that confuses is the sense that the trans community is generally seen as the underdog. In this context, in this unique context, that is the superior. And Caitlyn Jenner recognizes that. I don't think you can call Caitlyn Jenner anti-trans. I don't think she bullies people. This bill is about simple, competitive fairness. And when we get people like, when you get things like the NCAA coming out with completely hypocritical statements, same organization that says on one side of their webpage, strictly prohibit performance-enhancing drugs for the health of the athlete and fair competition, comes out with a statement now that says, oh, but we're going to monitor this and make sure this group takes hormone-suppressive drugs to try to create some perception of fairness. Most hypocritical thing you could do. What happened to the health of those athletes? And then just threaten us with basketball games. We won't do a tournament here. Fairness for my girls is not for sale. This shouldn't be controversial. This should be a simple vote. And I'd ask you to override the veto. Thank you.
Senator from Shawnee, Senator O'Shea.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. I find it ironic and disheartening that certain groups and individuals keep saying that this policy will cause bullying and hate. These very same groups put signs of hate, accusation, assumptive bullying words in the senator from Sedgwick's home residence. This makes me sad. I hope it does for you too. The senator would never share this because she doesn't want to make it about her. But I really hope that it sheds some light on the situation and what's going on here. I'm open to anyone wanting to have a conversation about bullying. I believe bullying is real. It's very real and very different in a lot of different situations for lots of different people. But I hope that today we remember what this is about, and it's about fairness for women and girls, and I look forward to everyone voting yes. Thank you.
Senator from Finney, Senator Dahl.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was a teacher and a coach for 20 years, taught American government. To make it very clear, I 100% agree with the policy that transgenders should not compete. But I called ks.gov, I called Executive Council. There is regulations that they cannot compete unless everybody good. I mean, there's so many steps that are along the way. Then I think back to my government days. I'm teaching, and I can remember every year this was an essay question. I said, what are the 5, and explain, what are the 5 basic concepts of a democracy? I mean, we might not agree with all of them, but here are your 5 basic concepts of democracy. A fundamental worth of all individuals. Where do we set with that? With this. Equality of all persons. This is a basic concepts of democracy, who we are. Majority rule, minority rights. That's the 3rd one. Necessity of compromise. And finally, individual freedom. As long as we're not doing anything to harm somebody else, we should be able to do it. That's what our country is about. If you want to take the 6 basic principles of our Constitution, one of those would be limited government. We already have policy in place right now that transgenders cannot compete competitively in Kansas State Activities Associations. This is nothing but piling on. You know, we're all God's children. We all have our different subsets, and maybe we agree with a particular type of people, the way they live their life and how they know they don't. I can't tell you, I cannot begin to, I don't know. I don't know one transgender person. I don't know. I'm not going to judge it anyway. All I know is that it is covered that they cannot compete and that we have limited government and everybody has the right to respect and dignity. And we're taking this away. Thank you.
Senator from Sedgwick, Senator Erickson, do you care to respond?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Vice President. I appreciate those sentiments from the good senator from Finney. I, too, was a teacher and coach, and I did know transgender students. And I do have notes thanking me for treating them with the respect and dignity that he's claiming is worthy of all. And I agree. And that's not what this bill is about. So let's take a little look at some of the statements that were made. First of all, limited government. No one is a stronger proponent of limited government than I am. But let's take a look at it. I pulled a statute. It's 41-1001. And it says, this act shall be known as the Kansas Act Against Discrimination. It shall be deemed an exercise of the police power of the state for the protection of the public welfare, safety, health, and peace of the people of this state. The practice or policy of discrimination against individuals in employment relations, in relation to free and public accommodations, in housing by reason of race, religion, color, sex, disability, national origin, or ancestry, or in housing by reason of familial status or in a manner of concern to the state, since such discrimination threatens not only the rights and privileges of the inhabitants of the state of Kansas, but menaces the institutions and foundations of a free, democratic state. So I look forward to the people who are saying, this isn't an issue for the state to take up. I want to see them bring legislation to remove this statute, and let's give the anti-discrimination rights to local governments or third-party agencies that have no oversight by the legislature. Because we do have statutes that protect discrimination. This bill protects discrimination against girls, and it is our right and it is our responsibility to speak up. As far as ks.gov, I've read the Acacia policy, and the Acacia policy says to let each individual school board decide whether they allow transgenders to participate or not. But they do have to report to Acacia if they have a transgender student that wants to participate. So there's not consistency in Acacia's policy. It's a very liberal, open policy. So what do you do when you have one school district that does allow it and one district that does not allow it competing? I don't know. Either it's right and fair or it's not. I'd like to address individual freedom. I agree 100%. We have individual freedom, and I will fight for that any day of the week. But when your individual freedom infringes on the rights of somebody else, such as this does, if we don't have this bill, then that's where your individual freedom stops, is when it infringes on somebody else's. As far as opportunities go, Mr. Vice President, think about it. A trans student without this bill has 2 opportunities to participate. They can participate on the boys or the girls team. A biological female who is participating in girls sports, should they get displaced, what option do they have? They have no opportunities. Is that fair? 2 opportunities for some students, 0 for others. That's what this bill protects. Every person deserves to be treated with respect and dignity and not be bullied. As a former school administrator, I spent most of my days dealing with issues of bullying. And bullying runs the gamut. Kids are bullied for every reason under the sun. Doesn't make any of it right. Nor is it right to bully the girls who have worked hard, played by the rules, and are going to lose their opportunities unfairly to participate and excel and to get scholarships if we do not pass this bill. This bill does exactly what the governor and the opposition say they want. So that is my response, Mr. Vice President. I'll stand for any more questions.
Seeing no other questions, we are now ready for final action. And again, I want to reemphasize, a yes vote is to override the veto. A no vote is to sustain the veto. The clerk will call the roll.
Alley. Baumgardner. Billinger. Bowers. Clays. Orson. Dietrich. Dahl. Erickson. Fagg. Voscadeau. Francisco. Gossage. Haley. Hawk. Hildebrand. Holland. Holscher. Kirshen. Cluse. Longbine. Masterson. McGinn. Olson. O'Shea. Peck. Peterson. Petty. Pittman. Kyle. Reichman. Steffen. Straub. Sullentrop. Sykes. Thompson. Tyson. Ware. Warren. Wilborn.
Has every senator had the opportunity to vote? Senator from Cherokee, Senator Hildebrand.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. Can we get a temporary or a preliminary count, please?
Preliminary count is 26 yay, 13 nay, and apparently there's a pass.
Call of the Senate.
Seeing 5 hands, we are now call it Senate. Senators will be in their seats. Senators will be in their seats, and the clerk will call the roll.
Haley.
Senator from Wyandotte, Senator Haley.
I'd like to thank you, Mr. Vice President, but I'm really not grateful. Mr. Vice President and then members, this is probably one of the most difficult votes I've had to take during my time here in the Senate. As you know, I've been here longer than all of us. And it's difficult because the issues are so well reasoned on both sides. I don't like to straddle the fence. I don't like to constantly pass on any issue. I am having to be conflicted because I've heard from constituents on both sides, and I understand what both of the sides are meaning. So, Mr. Vice President, without going into great detail, because this is a crucial issue, I will say that when it comes to discrimination, it troubles me that young children might be discriminated as to what their gender is and their gender identification is. And when it comes to the participation, especially at latter years for sports, it concerns me on the flip side that we are looking at a society where strong economic decisions as to how welcoming and progressive Kansas is can have an economic impact on some venues in sports. I should say that during the interim, we had extended member of my family who signed on with the university because she was so competitive in sports, and she's a marginal track star. And she only got that scholarship because she's on the girls' team, and her family would not have been able to send her to college if she had not gotten that. And I am concerned about physically competitive disadvantages if this bill were not to pass. I think about that. Finally, let me say, Mr. Vice President, I had an interesting discussion about Ms. Jenner. I was coming through customs the other line, 45-minute line coming through customs the other day, and in front of me was two men who identified as gay, and behind me, ironically, two women who identified as lesbian. And Mr. Vice President, I'll talk to anybody about anything if I have enough time. And I said, we were all talking about coming back and going back to work and what will we do. And I mentioned this issue. And they were of no help in my decision. The two gentlemen in front of me who identified as gay through a vigorous discussion felt that transgender girls should participate. And the two ladies behind me in the line who identified as lesbian said they felt that they should not, with very reasoned on both sides. They didn't help it at all. So I've been called upon to make a decision. I haven't before. In closing, you know, passing, I'm very sensitive to my constituents and to each of you on both sides of this issue. This isn't a party issue for me. I have been the most progressive on issues of LGBTQ. Hired the first staffer who was openly gay, and my hate crimes legislation always includes sexual orientation for those enhancements for bias. I'm a solo sponsor of that bill. The marriage debate here, I led the charge for marriage equality in this chamber, along with former Senator David Atkins. Again, I mentioned against Senator Huelskamp. It was a vigorous debate. I was proud of my record then. I remember the bathroom bill. And it hurts me, really, because I understand that the physical disadvantage that might be afforded to people like extended family is real. So in taking my seat and casting my vote, I'm reminded of the, again, the Civil War, one who fought who understood and sympathized with the Union and wore a blue shirt, and understood and sympathized with the Confederacy, and wore gray pants, ended up being shot by both sides. In passing, that's what it is. David Haley can't win in this discussion, in this debate, because I do fully understand 50-50 where we are. Having said that, I join the minority in this particular vote, and I vote no.
Senator will lift the call. Are there any changes of vote? Any further explanations of vote? Seeing none, the clerk will tally the vote. (26 in favor and 14 against, a 2/3 constitutional majority not having voted in favor of overriding the governor's veto on Senate Bill 55. The motion does not prevail and the veto is sustained. Before recessing, are there announcements? Senator from Johnson, Senator Warren.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. Senate Judiciary Committee will meet upon recess, and we are in room 542 North. I had stated a different room earlier, but we are in 542 North. Thank you, Mr. Vice President.
The Senator from Lyons, Senator Longbine.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. The Senate FI&I has a reappointment confirmation that we need to do for a state banking board member. You should very shortly be receiving an electronic version of that packet and that application. Since the appointee is not required to appear, it is my intention to take care of this sometime this afternoon at the rail. And so if my committee members would make sure that they review that packet prior to that, I would greatly appreciate it. Thank you, Mr. Vice President.
Are there any other announcements? Seeing none, I turn to the senator from Cali, Senator Alley.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. Republicans will caucus at 2 p.m. in a normal room, and I yield to Senator from Douglas, Senator Francisco.
Senator from Douglas, Senator Francisco.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. The Democrats will also caucus at 2 p.m. in our regular room, 287 North this afternoon. I yield back to the senator from Cali.
Senator from Cali, Senator Alley.
Thank you. I move the Senate recess till 2:30 p.m.
You have heard the motion. All those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. The motion carried. Senate is recessed. The Senate will come to order. First item of business, the call on the senator from Lyon, Senator Longbine.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. Financial institutions and insurance would like to have a meeting at the rail for a reappointment confirmation meeting right now. That's okay with you, Mr. Vice President?
It is fine, Mr. Longbine, Senator Longbine. Now the clerk will read the messages from the House.
Announcing the House herewith transmits the certificate of action by the House of Representatives on SB 50, an act concerning taxation relating to sales and compensating use tax, requiring the collection and remittance for sales tax, compensating use and transient guest taxes, and prepaid wireless 911 fees made on marketplace facilitator platforms, removing click-through nexus provisions relating to income tax, providing for additional and subtraction modifications for the treatment of global intangible low-taxed income, business interest, capital contributions, FDIC premiums, and business meals, expanding the expense deduction for income taxpayers and calculating the deduction amount, providing the ability to elect to itemize for individuals exemption for unemployment, compensation income attribute as a result of identity fraud, removing the line for reporting compensating use tax from individual tax returns, extending the dates when corporate tax returns are required to be filed, increasing the Kansas standard deduction, providing for an extension of the corporate net operating loss carry forward period, amending KSA 79-3221, 79-3221-0, 79-32-117, 79-32-119, 79-32-120, 79-32-138, 79-32-143, 79-32-143A, and 79-3702, and repealing the existing sections. The veto message from the governor having been received, a motion was made that notwithstanding the governor's objection to SB 50, the bill be passed by a vote of 84 yeas and 39 nays. The motion having received the required 2/3 constitutional majority of the members elected or appointed to the House of Representatives voting in the affirmative, the bill passed. Announcing the House herewith transmit the veto message from the governor together with the enrolled copy of HB 2058, an act concerning crimes, punishment, and criminal procedure relating to firearms, reducing the underlying felonies for the crime of criminal possession of a weapon by a convicted felon, restoration of the right to possess firearms upon expungement of convictions, recognition of licenses under the Personal and Family Protection Act issued by other jurisdictions, creating a provisional license for persons under the age of 21, authorizing the issuance of alternative license during certain circumstances, amending KSA 75-7CO2, 75-7CO3, 75-7CO4, 75-7CO5, 75-7CO8, and 75-7C21, and KSA 2020 sub 21-5914, 21-6301, 21-6302, 21-6304, 21-6309, 21-6614, and 32-1002, and repealing the existing sections which was received on April 23, 2021, and read on May 3, 2021. Throughout my time in public office, I have a strong supporter of the Second Amendment of the Kansas right to own firearms, but we can respect and defend the rights of Kansas gun owners while also taking effective steps to keep our children and families safe. Legislation that allows more guns on campus is neither safe nor effective, and it will drive prospective students away from our schools. Therefore, under Article 2, Section 14A of the Constitution, I hereby veto House Bill 2058. A motion was made that HB 2058 be passed, notwithstanding the governor's veto, by a vote of 84 yeas and 39 nays, the motion having received the required two-thirds constitutional majority of the members elected or appointed to the House of Representatives. Voting in the affirmative, the bill passed. Announcing the House herewith transmits the veto message from the governor together with the enrolled copy of HB 2183. An act concerning elections, creating the Transparency and Revenues Underwriting Elections Act, prohibiting the receipt and expenditure of private monies by election officials, directing the Secretary of State to publish certain registered voter totals relating to the advanced voting ballots, requiring signed statements for delivery of such ballots on behalf of a voter, limiting the number of such ballots that can be delivered, prohibiting the altering or backdating of the mailing date on such ballots, requiring a matching signature on such ballots, removing the Secretary of State's authority to provide an additional time for receipt of such ballots, prohibiting candidates for office from engaging in certain conduct relating to advanced voting ballots, creating the crime of false representation of an election official, expanding the crime of electioneering, penalties for violations, amending KSA 2020 sub 25-1124, 25-1128, 25-1132, 25-2430, and repealing the existing sections. Also repealing KSA 25-608, which was received on April 23, 2021. Although Kansans have cast millions of ballots over the last decade, there remains no evidence of significant voter fraud in Kansas. This bill is a solution to a problem that doesn't exist. It is designed to disenfranchise Kansans, making it difficult for them to participate in the democratic process, not to stop voter fraud. We also know that what happens when states enact restrictive voting legislation. Hundreds of major companies across the nation have made it abundantly clear that this kind of legislation is wrong. Antagonizing the very businesses Kansas is trying to recruit is now how we continue to grow our economy. Therefore, under Article 2, Section 14A of the Constitution, I hereby veto Senate substitute for House Bill 2183. A motion was made that HB 2183 be passed, notwithstanding the governor's veto, by a vote of 85 yeas and 38 nays, the motion having received the required two-thirds constitutional majority of the members elected or appointed to the House of Representatives. Voting in the affirmative, the bill passed. Announcing the House herewith transmits the veto message from Governor together with the enrolled copy of HB 2166. An act concerning motor vehicles relating to distinctive license plates, providing for the Braden's Hope for Childhood Cancer, Proud Educator, Delta Sigma Theta, Gadsden Flag Love, Chloe Foundation, and Alpha Kappa Alpha distinctive license plates, providing distinctive plates for current and veteran members of the United States Army, Navy, Marine Corps, Air Force, Coast Guard, and Space Force. Modifying requirements to begin with production on distinctive license plates, requiring reporting, sponsoring organizations of income and expenditures derived from certain distinctive license plate fees, establishing a fee for firefighter license plates, allowing certain license plates issued by the Division of Vehicles to be personalized license plates, amending KSA 2020 sub 8-132, 8-1, 141, 8-1, 142, 8-1, 147, 8-1, 155, and repealing the existing sections, which was received on April 23, 2021. As long as I'm governor, I will do everything in my power to ensure that Kansans remain welcoming and inclusive. The Gadsden flag has become over time a symbol of racism and divisiveness. By inserting the Gadsden provision into the otherwise positive piece of legislation, the legislature ensured a veto. Should the original bill be passed and sent to my desk, I will sign it. Under Article 2, Section 14A of the Constitution, I hereby veto House Bill 2166. A motion was made that HB 2166 be passed, notwithstanding the governor's veto, by a vote of 86 yeas and 37 nays. the motion having received the required 2/3 constitutional majority of the members elected or appointed to the House of Representatives, voting in the affirmative, the bill passed. Announcing, the House herewith transmits the veto message from the governor together with the enrolled copy of HB 2332, an act concerning elections relating to the conduct of elections, providing for the appointment and duties of certain elected officials, amending KSA 73-213, 73-214, 73-215, 73-218, 73-219, and KSA 2020 SUP 25-1122 and 25-2423, and repealing the existing sections, which was received on April 23, 2021. Although Kansans have cast millions of ballots over the last decade, there remains no evidence of significant voter fraud in Kansas. This bill is a solution to a problem that doesn't exist. It is designed to disenfranchise Kansas and making it difficult for them to participate in the democratic process, not to stop voter fraud. We also know what happens when states enact restrictive voting legislation. Hundreds of major companies across the nation have made it abundantly clear that this kind of legislation is wrong. Antagonizing the very businesses Kansas is trying to recruit is not how we continue to grow our economy. Therefore, under Article 2, Section 14A of the Constitution, I hereby veto House Bill 2332. A motion was made that HB 2332 be passed, notwithstanding the governor's veto. By a vote of 86 yeas and 37 nays, the motion having received the required 2/3 constitutional majority of the members elected or appointed to the House of Representatives, voting in the affirmative, the bill was passed.
The chair recognizes the senator from Saline, Senator Clays.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. See, House substitute. Yeah, substitute for House Bill 2166 does three things. First, it lowers the threshold for distinctive license plate to have one issued. Now that we have that system that prints the plates on demand, it's no longer necessary to have such a high threshold. It adds reporting requirements for recipients of funds from plate royalties, so we have an idea of how those funds are being spent. It then creates several plates. It creates armed services plates for the Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines, Coast Guard, and Space Force. It creates 2 plates supporting childhood cancer research and children with cancer. It creates 2 plates for sororities, the Alpha Kappa Alpha and Delta Sigma Theta plates. It creates a Don't Tread on Me plate, and it creates a Proud Educator plate. The veto message of the governor having been read, I move substitute for House Bill 2166 be passed, notwithstanding the governor's veto, and I will stand for questions.
Are there any questions from the senator from Saline? Seeing none, we are ready. Excuse me, the senator from Douglas, Senator Francisco.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. I do have a question for the senator from Saline, if he would stand for it.
Yes, Senator from Saline will. Senator Prigger. Senator from Douglas, please. Senator Francisco.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. So the question I have is there an estimate of how much money the National Rifle Association Foundation would get from the sales of such plates?
Senator Clays, you care to answer that?
$0.
Senator from Douglas.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. I did try to clarify that it was the foundation or their foundation arm, so they would get, the National Rifle Association would get no dollars from the sales of the Gadsden plates?
Senator from Saline, Senator Clays.
That is correct.
Can I ask another question?
Please proceed.
Thank you. Would the Kansas State Rifle Association receive any funds?
Senator Clays.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. A charge of $25 per plate would be transferred to the Kansas State Rifle Association.
Senator from Douglas.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. And are they considered a political, partisan organization? Do they contribute to individual candidates?
Senator Clays.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. No, the Kansas State Rifle Association does not contribute to candidates.
Senator from Douglas.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. I think that there's some perhaps confusion and concern regarding this. Again, a concern that there were not as many questions as might be asked in committee had this been part of the bill and not just introduced as an amendment. Thank you.
Are there any other questions? Seeing none, we'll take final action. And again, the clarification, a yes vote is a vote to override. A no vote is a vote to sustain. The clerk will call the roll.
Alley. Baumgardner. Billinger. Bowers. Clays. Corson. Dietrich. Dahl. Erickson. Bag. Voscato. Francisco. Gossage. Haley. Hawk. Hildebrand. Holland. Holscher. Kirshen. Luce. Longbine. Masterson. McGinn. Olson. O'Shea. Peck. Peterson. Petty. Pittman. Pyle. Reichman. Steffen. Straub. Sullentrop. Sykes. Thompson. Tyson. Ware. Warren. Wilborn.
Has every senator had the opportunity to vote? Does any senator wish to explain their vote? Senator from Wyandotte, Senator Haley.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. I was under the, I vote no on this bill. I'm glad to see the good provisions continue to pass for the worthy organizations. As I said, when this came through before, my concern is that we are promoting and giving the opportunity for people to unwittingly support despotism in our history with the Gadsden flag. I was under the impression that that onerous part would have been stripped out. That was kind of the original assertion. That having been said, for all the good that the bill does, the remaining parts of the bill does, I just hope that we'll find the public information campaign to be vigorous to ensure that no Kansan will unwittingly, because of the clever slogan, "Don't tread on me," unwittingly be supporting slavery and all that Gadsden Wharf means to our legacy. Thank you. And no, I don't want to.
Are there any other explanation of votes? Seeing none, are there any change of votes? Seeing none, the clerk will call the roll, or tally the roll. 28 in favor and 12 against, a two-thirds constitutional majority, having voted in favor of overriding the governor's veto on Sub 4 House Bill 2166, the motion prevails and the bill passes. The chair recognizes the senator from Cherokee, Senator Hildebrand.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. Do you just want me to pick one, or am I supposed to do?
The one I have is House Bill 2332.
Thank you. House Bill 2332 creates and amends law concerning addresses maintained for registered voters, solicitation of advanced voting ballot applications, alteration of election laws, and the crime of election tampering. When we heard this originally in the Senate, it passed with the veto-proof majority. And now we are addressing it again after the governor vetoed it, and the House just had enough votes to override her veto, so it's up to us to finish the job. And with the veto message of the governor having been read, I move House Bill 2058, House Bill 2332 be passed, notwithstanding the governor's veto.
You have heard the motion. Are there any questions? Senator from Johnson, Senator Corson.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. You know, I'm going to be opposing this bill. I'm going to be opposing the other voter suppression bill. And the reason is that these bills, both of them, are unnecessary. They're confusing. They're poorly vetted. They were drafted without any input from election commissioners or election administrators in our counties. They will undoubtedly lead to years of costly taxpayer-funded litigation, and they are bad for business. We've seen how businesses across the country have reacted to voter suppression laws. At a time when we should be laser focused on the economic recovery from COVID-19, why would we want to pass legislation that sends a message that Kansas is not open for business? The Secretary of State and our county election officials did not ask for this legislation. Quite the opposite. Our Republican Secretary of State has consistently stated that Kansas does not have a problem with voter fraud. In fact, Secretary Schwab told the legislature, quote, "I don't know how Kansas could do it better. We have a lot of my colleagues across the country looking at the way we do things and how they can implement it." Where I live in Johnson County, our former election commissioner wrote that in the presidential election of 2020, with the pandemic changing voter trends daily and election administrators racing to fill the cracks in our solid foundation and keep the process moving forward seamlessly, Kansas was a shining example of how to do it right. And she went on to plead, if it works, please don't change it. And when I say these bills are intended to make it harder for Kansans to vote, it's not just me saying that. These bills are opposed by the Disability Rights Center of Kansas because they artificially limit who a person with a disability can have return their ballot or ask to assist them in voting. They are opposed by the Kansas NAACP because they will make it harder for voters of color to vote. These bills are even opposed by many of the Sisters of St. Joseph in Concordia because they rely on the help of others to return their ballots. You know, there are not many ironclad rules in politics, but when you start trying to disenfranchise the nuns, that is never a good thing. We are at a position where we're looking at a law that would potentially allow someone to be charged with a felony simply for helping people register to vote, would make it a crime to assist more than 10 voters, which presents legal concerns because of its impact on disabled, elderly, and non-English language voters, prevents voters who need help from being assisted by the person of their choice. And I will just end by saying that when we debated these bills the first time, I received an email from a constituent, and she said that she regularly provides assistance to elderly, disabled, and homebound voters in her community to make sure that they are able to vote. And what she needed to know from me is exactly what conduct would, under these bills, now subject her to criminal penalties. I do not think that is a direction we want to go as Kansans, where we criminalize neighbors helping neighbors. We need to uphold the governor's veto of these voter suppression bills. I will be voting no, and I would ask the body to as well. Thank you.
Are there any other questions? Senator Hildebrand, would you care to respond?
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. Yes, I would. I know sometimes people give me, especially up in caucus, they gave me a hard time about it contains stuff in it, and I probably don't give a proper enough explanation of what's in this vote, but I believe the good senator from Johnson County was referring to a different bill. This bill does not criminalize anything except if you alter a ballot, and that should be criminalized. As far as poorly vetted, if this bill was poorly vetted, that means every bill that we've ever passed in this body is poorly vetted, and we can make that argument with everything that we do. Everybody has been around long enough to know the process of a bill. Starts in a committee, works through the chamber, at least one chamber. It's passed to the other chamber. If it doesn't pass the other chamber, it goes into conference committee. It's conferenceable, comes out. Each chamber then votes on it again. And in this case, we had the added vettedness of we get to look at it again because our governor decided to veto it. These election bills are not meant and set up to disenfranchise voters. It's quite the opposite. These votes, or these bills are intended to ensure that every single legal vote cast is counted. And that is the sole purpose of each and every one of these election bills that we're discussing. Thank you, Mr. Vice President.
Are there any other questions? The senator from Sedgwick, Senator Falscato.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. And if the gentleman from Cherokee will answer a question.
You will.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. So serving on the Senate Federal and State Affairs Committee and having the opportunity to hear this election bill and others, as opposed to having those hearings in the Senate Elections Committee, we had the hearings in the Federal and State Affairs Committee. I did go through that process, the committee meetings, debates on the Senate floor, the conference committees, and if for the future, for history, I did put my initials there on the conference committee, and I put a question mark after for anybody who's a history buff or our children in the future are looking at that and seeing why. Me, who sometimes I feel invisible, I wanted it to be known that I was there. I was part of the process and participated in that process, although the majority ruled, and I, as an individual, understanding that people died for the right to vote, and I agree too. We don't want bad actors voting, fraudulently voting, and sometimes just because the majority rules and legislation passes with the majority doesn't mean it's always right, Mr. Vice President. So, but what my question to the gentleman from Cherokee would be, so if he could, for those listening in and who were not present in the committee hearing and that process, share the reason why we want to limit the amount of advanced voters or limit the amount of advanced ballots we could pick up and drop off for. Like for me, Mr. Vice President, I ran for office to help those with disabilities, as my mother was, and senior citizens. And again, many of you knew about the Grandparents as Caregivers Act. That was one of my first pieces of legislation I fought very hard for. And so helping those with disabilities and our seniors, very important to me. And so I sometimes get calls from senior citizens that say, honey, will you come and pick my ballot up, because they don't drive, you know, and so I do that. And so if he could explain the reason that we want to limit the amount of advanced ballots that you could pick up. I think in that conference committee or in committee, I can't remember now, but I was able to get an amendment on there to whereas the number went up, because at first it was like 5. And then I think, and I said, well, I have 7 siblings, and so if it were 5, I'd have to leave out a couple of them. So if he could just, that's my comment and my question, just explain why we want to limit that amount and how many would it be and who, and explain the difference of whether it's an elected official or one running for office as opposed to someone like a League of Women Voters or just a college or high school student volunteering to pick up advanced ballots. Thank you, Mr. Vice President.
The senator from Cherokee, Senator Hildebrand, do you care to respond?
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. I would love to respond, but unfortunately that language is not in this bill. That is in a different bill. This bill only deals with advanced balloting on solicitation for mail. So if a third party mails a solicitation for an advanced ballot, that is what this bill addresses. It doesn't limit anything. It just says if you are going to solicit as a third party, these are the requirements you have to meet to send that.
Senator from Sedgwick, Senator Pascato.
Mr. Vice President, I'm aware of that piece of legislation, or all of it. It's all kind of combined. You know how we bundle bills. But if he is saying, in fact, that it does not address the 10 or 15 or 20 advanced ballots that can be picked up and delivered, I've already given my commentary, and I will sit and stand on the next bill then, Mr. Vice President, on 2138 that's coming up.
Senator Cherokee, Senator Hildebrand.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. And I apologize. I'm going to circle back. I had a note that I had written down off of a previous comment. When the comment was made that this bill was poorly vetted and all the election bills were poorly vetted, that there was no input from any election office or official. I apologize. I do not tell everybody I talk to, but I can assure this body that I have talked to numerous election officials, not only in my district, but outside of my district, about things that were going into this bill and about this bill. And as a matter of fact, a lot of what is in this bill is based off of recommendations that were received by those election officials.
Are there other comments or questions? Seeing none, we're ready for final action. The clerk will call the roll.
Alley. Baumgardner. Bellinger. Bowers. Plays. Orson. Dietrich. Dahl. Erickson. Ag. Pascato. Francisco. Gossage. Haley. Hawk. Hildebrand. Holland. Holscher. Hershin. Luce. Longbine. Masterson. McGinn. Olson. O'Shea. Peck. Peterson. Petty. Pittman. Kyle. Reichman. Steffen. Straub. Sullentrop. Sykes. Thompson. Tyson. Ware. Warren. Wilborn.
Has every senator had the opportunity to vote? Does any senator wish to explain their vote? Does any senator wish to change their vote? Seeing none, the clerk will close the roll and tally the vote. "28 in favor, 12 against, a 2/3 constitutional majority having voted in favor of overriding the governor's veto on House Bill 2332. The motion prevails and the bill passes. The senator recognizes the senator from Cali, Senator Alley.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. This is the bill, and it's 2183. And this bill comes out of the Fed and State, and it amended, 2183 as amended, would create new law pertaining to elections, voting, advanced ballots, registered voter information, advanced ballot return deadlines, the authority of the Secretary of State to duties of election officers. It also would create a crime of false representation of an election official.
Would you care to make a motion?
The veto message of the governor having been read, I move that Senate substitute for House Bill 2183 be passed, notwithstanding the governor's veto.
You have heard the motion. Are there any questions? Senator from Sedgwick, Senator Faust-Cadeau.
Mr. Vice President, for the gentleman carrying the bill, Senator Alley, chairman of the committee, I think my question that I just stated previously goes to him. If he would stand for a question, please.
He will.
Would you repeat?
I will. I won't.
Senator from Sedgwick, would you please restate the question?
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. If Senate Bill or House Bill 2183 for the senator from Cowley would this be the one to whereas I, an elected official running for office, could only pick up 10, I want verification for those listening in. Is it 10 advance ballots, 15 or 20? And could he explain the reason for that and just verify the number?
Senator from Cali, Senator Alley.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. For someone picking up ballots that is not a candidate, it was 10. For a candidate, they can pick up to 10 ballots for their relatives.
Senator from Sedgwick.
And I believe, Mr. Vice President, this is where originally was 5, and then we kind of compromised on the 10. And if the Senator Alley from Cali could share, why do we want to limit the amount that a volunteer or League of Women Voters, or those that do try to help our seniors and people with disabilities by returning their advance ballots? Why do we want to limit the amount?
Senator from Cali, Senator Alley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The the limiting of the ballots was due to what was been occurring all over the United States. In fact, it occurred here in Kansas, where people would go in and pick up a multitude of ballots, including, and not limited to, our candidates who are picking up 50 to 100 ballots.
Senator from Sedgwick, Senator Falscadeau.
So, and then what would be wrong with that, Mr. Chairman?
During the Senate and the House meeting, we heard that one gentleman who is a candidate, who was a senator, would go in, and he said that he went to a nursing home. There was 7 people outside of the nursing home that were relatives, and he went in and helped her mark her ballot. He didn't say he signed it for her, but he helped her mark her ballot and then took the ballot out because she trusted him. How often does this occur? I don't know, but that's called electioneering.
Senator from Sedgwick, Senator Falscadeau.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. And I know I'm not going to sway anybody with my comments. I hope I would, but I know that there's been times when you can go into a nursing home. I've actually, over the years, introduced legislation that's become law. I don't know if we're following it or not, to whereas you can assist one in filling out their advance ballot. You can also do that at the election polls, at the polling locations itself. We do have people that don't read well, that don't, and they need that assistance. We also still let people mark an X, and then you have a notary. We do have people that, my mother had 10 sisters, and sometimes they would say, honey, fill that out, and then I'll sign it. And they tell you what to write down. So that, for me, it's not uncommon that you would do that to assist. I don't know. I just, again, I want to make voting easier. And sometimes legislation we pass here seems to make it harder and difficult, especially for those with disabilities and our senior citizens. And so if, in fact, we don't have hard evidence and facts and a large number of a situation occurring, this would be election rights, democracy, equal rights for all that has been discussed on this floor earlier today, allowing everyone their right to vote and to participate in that process. When you don't have real facts that something is occurring, I know we want to prevent problems from occurring, but in this situation, it just wasn't convincing enough for me, and so I will be opposing legislation. Thank you, Mr. Vice President.
Senator from Cali, Senator Al, do you care to respond?
Yes, I do. We've heard in this chamber today that these bills suppress the vote. Nothing in these bills suppress the vote. These bills direct their attention to what happens after the vote. The voter still can vote. The voter votes without somebody else signing for them, somebody else marking that X for them. The voter votes. But what is happening here and what changes here is what happens after the vote. The collection of the ballots, the taking the ballots in. We want to make sure that the ballots are legitimate ballots, so that's the reason the voter has to sign them along with the person carrying the vote back if they do the 10 votes. But everything before that, the voter still votes, no change to the ballots.
Senator from Sedgwick, Senator Ware.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Let me start first with what the chairman said last, and that was that this is all just after the vote. Well, the truth is, of course, that the vote isn't done until the ballot is turned in and accepted. So, to carry on here, you know, intentions, and I know the intentions of these bills were basically good. You know, good, honest, fair elections, everybody wants that. But the problem is that the result, not the intention, but the result is not good. It does, in fact, make it harder for people to vote, and to the point that there will be quite a number who will not be able to vote at all. You know, I have great faith in the Kansas election officials. It's their job to decide whether or not any ballot is a good ballot or a bad ballot. Our dedicated election officials are laser focused on checking postmarks and signatures and making sure that every single part of each and every ballot is exactly the way it needs to be before it gets put in the good ballot stack. And you know, it really doesn't matter whether that ballot came in by itself, or with 2 others, or with 10 others. Every single ballot is going to go through the same process, and they will know for sure that it's a good ballot if it gets to the good ballot stack. And if it doesn't get to the good ballot stack, then they deal with it that way. So the bottom line is that a good ballot is a good ballot, a bad ballot is a bad ballot, and this does not address fraud. It simply limits voting. And it really doesn't matter if that was the intention. The result is that there would be fewer ballots cast. It's vote fraud. It's vote suppression, rather. It's as simple as that. Thank you.
Senator from Cali, Senator Al, do you care to respond?
No, I don't right now, because there are instances of fraud throughout the United States in elections. I have contacted my city clerk, my county clerk, multiple times on this, unlike what we've heard this afternoon. And we talked about the potential of fraud. We talked about how we could help our senior citizens in nursing homes, and we have a solution for that. We just didn't get it in a bill. But the ideal situation would be that they could deposit their right in the mail and send it out. They don't have to have ballot harvesters at this time, and that's what this tries to identify.
Are there other questions? Seeing none, we're ready for final action. Excuse me, the Senator from Douglas, Senator Francisco.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. I appreciated the comment that there are other ways to get ballots in, and one of those is by mail. Would the Senator from Cali give me any information he has on how long it might take to get a ballot returned through the mail?
Senator from Cali, Senator Alley.
If you mailed your ballot on election day, you now have 3 days to get your get that ballot to there.
Senator from Douglas.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. I appreciate that. And I know that there was some discussion of limiting that. But many of us have seen instances where there have been delays in the mail. And that's one of the reasons that people get nervous, even if it's 2 or 3 days before an election, and would prefer to have that ballot dropped off. Not everyone is able to do that. I appreciate very much services from representatives of the League of Women Voters in Douglas County, who both dropped off requests for advance ballots, and also were willing to return those advance ballots. So again, if someone wants to make sure that their ballot is counted, often they are relying on that being deposited and not necessarily put in the mail. Thank you.
Senator from Cali, do you care to respond?
Not at this time.
Senator from Johnson, Senator Corson.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. One of the parts of the bill that I'm particularly concerned about, because it attaches potential felonies, is this idea of false representation of an election official. And this is something that we added on the floor. And I'm just not sure that we have fully thought about the serious ramifications it could attach of making somebody a felon for, allegedly undertaking a false representation of an election official. Have we had instances in Kansas where we've had widespread false representation of an election official?
Senator from Cali, Senator Alley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, we have. We have ballots that have came in with the seal of the state on it, with the seal and the logo, if you want to call it that, of Secretary of State's office, and they came from out of state. And I personally have picked up a couple of those ballots that were sent from out of state. I've examined those, but they look like the official seal of the Secretary of State. They also look like official seal of state of Kansas.
Senator from Johnson, Senator Corson.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. Point of clarification. I believe we may be talking about applications for advance ballots. I don't, correct me if I'm wrong. I think that we're talking about applications, not actual ballots. Is that correct? I just want to be precise.
Senator from Cali, Senator Alley.
The two that I picked up were applications for an advance ballot. They would come from out of state.
Senator from Johnson, Senator Corson.
Thank you. I appreciate that clarification. Again, this just gives me pause because of the seriousness of a felony, and I do worry about folks who are just trying to do nonpartisan voter registration or other activities now potentially being subject to criminal penalties. There is not a reasonable person standard in this, which is something I would have expected to see, and maybe we would have added had we vetted this a little bit better. But I just worry about real concerns about volunteers now being charged with a felony and having to endure the cost of legal representation and putting up a defense. I don't believe that this has really been a problem we've seen in Kansas. The example given related to advanced ballot applications, that was dealt with in the previous bill that we just discussed. So again, anytime I see those felony penalties, an amendment on the floor, I don't think we fully thought about it. And I appreciate the body's time. Thank you.
Senator from Lynn, Senator Tyson.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. Would the senator from Johnson please stand for a question? Senator
will.
Corson.
Senator
Corson.
Oh, Senator Corson, excuse me. Senator from Johnson, Senator Corson. No. Roll on.
You know, I'm not surprised he won't stand for this question because this is a very important question. Our ballots in Kansas, are they based on the address of where a person lives? The answer to that, we all know, is yes. And the reason is because that defines which ballot we get and who's on that ballot for what districts we're in. Very critical. And would the good senator also know that approximately 8% of the addresses in our state voting database are inaccurate? 8% could be casting a ballot in the wrong location. I used to give a speech to high school students and college students, and it was one vote matters. Very bipartisan speech. But I went through history and gave examples on how one vote matters. I'll tell you one of the most notable was women's suffrage. A gentleman, state senator from Tennessee, got a letter from his mother the night before the vote asking him to support suffrage. That one vote mattered. We had elections this year through legislators. Those votes mattered. They were close elections. Every single vote matters, and the accuracy matters. So this bill is not about voter suppression. It is about voter accuracy and making sure that every legal vote counts. I would also ask the good senator, is he aware that over 20 counties in Kansas accepted out-of-state money They applied for and received grants from the CTCL for elections in Kansas. These are county election officers in our state that applied for money. They had to jump through hoops. They filled out an application. They provided some kind of parameters to receive this money. Over 20 counties in the state of Kansas. You don't think that's outside influence? I think the voters, in fact, I know the voters of Kansas demand accuracy and demand that these influences are not on our elections. I stand in very strong support, and I appreciate the good senator from the Fed and State Committee and all the committee's work, and I'm anxious to vote on this override. Thank you, Mr. Vice President.
Senator from Leavenworth, Senator Pittman.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. Just to be clear, this body is not voting, I don't think, on whether outside monies would influence the improvement of our election laws through these nonprofit grants that I presume they were. I don't know the details of that, as I didn't attend any hearings on that. But to talk to this bill, I would say that I've lost my train of thought. That's what I'd say. That just threw me for a loop while we were talking about that during this bill. I guess when the good senator from Johnson over there, who used to be a forecaster, brought up the fraudulent cases that were uncovered on the website he researched while we discussed this bill, the majority of those that were found by our former Secretary of State and by that website tended to be of the majority party. And I just want to make a note out here that there seems to be an idea that this idea that we're protecting the ability to do these different things on advanced ballot is a minority party initiative, and truthfully it's not. I am not sure why the KFL came out in such strong support of this. This is not a minority effort. The minority party, I believe, is standing just for keeping things as they are, as has been established as a good practice here in the state of Kansas, and I, for one, am afraid of the unforeseen impacts of what we're doing today. And I, for the life of me, cannot understand the difference between delivering 10 ballots and being completely within the law, and 11 ballots makes me a felon. I don't get that. I don't understand why we'll allow folks to sit there and participate and watch the polls and then call their partisan people to come and vote. And we don't call that vote harvesting. We call that getting people to the polls. This process of advanced ballots and mail-in ballots has worked fantastic during the pandemic. I am so proud of what our state did here, and I hope we're not mucking around and causing some issues that we just don't see in the future in terms of limiting these rights and access to votes. So I do oppose this.
Senator from Sedgwick, Senator Falscadeau.
Mr. Vice President, thank you. Just another quick question for the senator from Cowley.
The senator from Cowley, Senator Alley?
Yes. So originally, this legislation was brought to the committee to prevent what I know to be a fact. Initially, everybody across the state, I know in my Senate district, and even in my household, we were receiving multiple applications to request an advance ballot from out of state over and over and over. And it was coming from Missouri, I believe. And so initially this legislation came to the committee to stop that out of state sending. I believe, and I've been registered for many years, and I believe, but I received 6 of these applications saying, do you want to request an advance ballot? I then called my election officer in Sedgwick. I also called the good Secretary of State, Scott Schwab, and both our Secretary of State, he came to Wichita, my election commissioner, we really looked into this, and some of my constituents, They were at an event where they all had their multiple applications that they had received in the mail and wondering if they were legitimate or not. And so to prevent that, I initially supported the legislation because that made sense. And then along the way, I believe, as we do, we add amendments and other measures into good bills. And I just want to clarify with the gentleman from Cowley, Senator Alley, if I'm correct, was that the original intent of this legislation, Mr. Vice President?
Senator from Cali, Senator Alley, can you answer the question?
The original intent of this legislation, I think there were like 5 or 6 bills that were looked at, combined, and made into this final bill that we've seen today, and the earlier one which we voted on just a moment ago. The main reason for that is we want to make sure Kansas does not have the problems that we heard about in the other states. Kansas does, as we've heard today, a good election officer, and the city county clerks are doing a great job. However, we don't want that type of practice that we've heard about all over the rest of the United States to infiltrate Kansas. That was the main reason for these bills. The main thing that we wanted to have is a fair, a safe, a transparent election. And that gives people confidence in our election system. If we have those things going on, it make people feel safe in the election. That's really what we're talking about here.
Are there other questions or comments? Senator from Cherokee, Senator Hildebrand.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. I just want to point out an article that was in the Kansas City Star and just read a couple of excerpts out of it. And it was written or posted at 5 a.m. this morning. That was pretty early. If you vote in Kansas, here's what you need to know about 2 proposed election laws. These laws that we are talking about that are supposed to be voter suppression. And under it, there's a paragraph or 2 that says, would voting become more difficult? Under one of the proposals, it would be a misdemeanor to return more than 10 advance ballots on behalf of others. Advance voters who give their ballots to someone else would be required to sign a form verifying that they were not forced or unduly influenced. According to the National Conference of State Legislatures, this provision would fall in line with rules already in place in some other states, including Colorado and Pennsylvania. Other states make it illegal to return anyone's advance ballot but your own. Another section, what's going on in our states and how does Kansas compare? The short answer, according to the article, is in the changes under debate in Kansas are not as far-reaching as in other states. Other states have brought laws requiring voters to provide an excuse to vote absentee or reducing voting hours. Lonnie Atkinson, she's the director of the Center of the Study of Voting, Elections, and Democracy at the University of New Mexico, and Patrick Miller, a political scientist at the University of Kansas, agreed in this article that Kansas bills are moderate in comparison. Kansas is not included in the Brennan Center's April 1st or April list of states pursuing voter rights restrictions or expansion. On the whole, Atkinson said, the bills were not likely to have a severe impact on voter turnout in Kansas. Some measures, like a ban on falsifying a postmark, seem like common sense penalties, she said, while others added requirements for advance voting. This is not about voter suppression. These bills are about ensuring that every legal vote cast in Kansas is counted and that we have accurate and fair elections. Thank you.
Are there, Senator Alley, do you care to comment? Are there any other questions? Seeing none, we'll take final action. We are ready for final action. Again, a yes vote overrides the veto, a no vote It's just the opposite. So, clerk will call the roll.
Ellie. Baumgardner. Dillinger. Bowers. Plays. Horson. Dietrich. Dahl. Erickson. Ag. Escobedo. Francisco. Gossage. Haley. Hawk. Hildebrand. Holland. Holscher. Hershen. Cluse. Longbine. Masterson. McGinn. Olson. O'Shea. Peck. Peterson. Petty. Pittman. Kyle. Reichman. Steffen. Straub. Sullentrop. Sykes. Thompson. Tyson. Ware. Warren. Wilborn.
Has every senator had an opportunity to vote? Senator from Shawnee, Senator Cluse.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. Aye.
Duly noted. Yes, Senator from Sedgwick, Senator Erickson.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. Can we have a preliminary count, please?
Yes, a preliminary count is 28 yay, 12 nay. Does any senator wish to explain their vote? Does any senator wish to change their vote? The clerk will close the roll and tally the vote. "28 in favor and 12 against, a two-thirds constitutional majority having voted in favor of overriding the governor's veto on Senate sub for House Bill 2183. The motion prevails and the bill passes. The chair recognizes Senator from Cherokee, Senator Hildebrand, in reference to House Bill 2058.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. House Bill 2058 amends the law related to recognition and issuance of a concealed carry license, creates two concealed carry license classes, and creates the Kansas Protection of Firearms Rights Act. It originally passed the Senate 30-8. The House also passed back over there, and now we're over here to try to finalize the veto override. And the veto message of the governor having been read, I move House Bill 2058 be passed, notwithstanding the governor's veto.
You have heard the motion. Are there any questions? Yes, the senator from Johnson, Senator Holscher.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. I just do have one question in the respect that, do you see a profound reason why we would lower the age in regard to conceal and carry to 18, but we still have the provision that you have to be 21 to buy alcohol?
Senator, is that a question?
Yes, please.
Yes, the senator from Cherokee, Senator Hildebrand, care to respond?
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. We did not have that issue of lowering the alcohol rate to 18. That could have been an amendment, but it didn't. This bill is 18, and I support that.
Senator from Johnson, Senator Holster.
If I may, and thank you for answering that. The reason I ask that is because there's a lot of talk by people as far as 21 is an important age as far as development. And in fact, that is where we have set the level of buying alcohol and some other standards. Likewise, we also hear on the other side that if you have an 18-year-old who's in the service, they're allowed to carry arms. Why not a regular civilian? And I will tell you that as the daughter of a Marine, my father has impressed upon me that an 18-year-old civilian carrying a gun is much different than an 18-year-old in the service doing the same. And the military possession and usage is heavily supervised with extensive training, along with the requirement of proper storage. And we have some gaps in that regard in regard to civilians doing the same. Additionally, and I know we've had discussion on this, but just a few points to consider. Firearms are the second leading cause of death for children and teens in our state. With concern for mental health issues, it seems counterproductive to at this time lower the age to 18. And part of that issue is because of the fact that many individuals who are 18 are still in high school. They're associating with younger children, they're in their homes, they're at parties together, and again, we don't sell alcohol to anyone under 21 because that's considered dangerous. The same can be said of this action. Finally, as someone who has worked on behalf of victims of violence, this bill is very concerning because as amended, it makes it easier for abusers and stalkers to carry weapons. Statistically, these are the very people most likely to act out in violence against women. This is a big step backwards in respecting and protecting women in our state. I will be voting no and encourage the body to do the same.
Senator Hildebrand, do you care to respond?
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. Just a reminder to this body that an 18-year-old, 19-year-old, and 20-year-old can right now legally carry a firearm. One of the good things about this bill is in order for them to carry that legally as a concealed firearm, they have to go through proper training, how to handle a firearm, how to shoot a firearm, and safety classes and things like that. So it is a step forward in allowing someone that's 18 to 20, even though they can still carry a firearm without that training, if they want to do it concealed, they have to take that training.
Are there any other questions or comments? Seeing none, we're ready for final action. The clerk will call the roll.
Alley. Baumgardner.
Senator Alley, do you care to vote?
Dillinger. Bowers. Plays. Orson. Dietrich. Dahl. Erickson. Begg. Faust-Godot. Francisco. Gossage. Bailey. Hawk. Hildebrand. Holland. Holscher. Urshan. Cluse. Longbine. Masterson, McGinn, Olson, O'Shea, Peck, Peterson, Petty, Pittman, Pyle, Reichman, Steffen, Straub, Sullentrop, Sykes, Thompson, Tyson, Ware, Warren, Wilborn.
Has every senator had an opportunity to vote? Senator Warren from Johnson County.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Vice President. Can we have a preliminary vote count?
Yes, the 30 yay and 8 nays and 2 passes.
Can we do we've got a couple of members out. We do a call of the Senate.
Seeing 5 hands, we have a call of the Senate. Close the doors. All senators will be in their seats. The clerk will call the roll.
Clays, Holland,
Mr. Vice President, I vote pass because I own a firearms manufacturing company. I would request that the body honor that vote. Thank you.
The chair rules in your favor. We will maintain under a call, and the senator from Saline is now arriving. It's clear the call, we remove the call. The clerk will tally the vote. "31 in favor and 8 against, a 2/3 constitutional majority having voted in favor of overriding the governor's veto on House Bill 2058, the motion prevails and the bill passes." Introduction of bills and concurrent resolutions, the clerk will read.
Senate Bill 313 by Committee on Federal and State Affairs, an act concerning roads and highways.
This constitutes introduction of Senate Bill 313. Are there announcements? The senator from Sherman, Senator Bellinger.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. Senate Ways and Means, we will meet at 4:15 in our usual room, 480. $548.
Senator from Lynn, Senator Tyson.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. The Senate Tax Committee will meet at 4 p.m. However, the room is being used by Ways and Means, so we have rescheduled to room 144 South. Again, 144 South at 4 p.m. Thank you, Mr. Vice President.
The senator from Johnson, Senator Warren.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. The Senate and House Judiciary Conference Committee will meet tomorrow at 8 a.m. in room 542 North. 8 a.m. 542 North. Thank you.
Are there other, yes, the senator from Cherokee, Senator Hildebrand.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. Just wanted to draw everybody's attention to the little flyer on your desk. The Legislative Bible Study will be Wednesday, May 5th at 7 a.m. in room 142 South.
At this time, I'm appointing the senator from Johnson, Senator Corson, to replace the senator from Wyandotte, Senator Haley, as a Senate conferee on Senate Bill 58. Seeing no other announcements, I recognize the senator from Cali, Senator Alley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The Senate Republicans will recess until the sound of the gavel, and we will caucus at 9:15 in the morning in our usual room. I yield to the senator from Douglas, Senator Francisco.
Senator from Douglas, Senator Francisco.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. The Senate Democrats will caucus tomorrow morning at 9:15 in our regular room, 287 North. I yield back to the senator from Cali.
Senator from Cali, Senator Alley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move the Senate recess until the sound of the gavel on Tuesday, May 4th, 2021.
Senator from Cali would like to have her restate that motion. We recess at the sound of the gavel without a date.
Move the Senate convene at the sound of the gavel, May 4th, 2021.
Just a minute. Just a minute. Bear with us. Yes, the senator from Cali, Senator Alley.
I move the Senate recess until the sound of the gavel.
You have heard the motions. All those in favor say aye. Opposed? No. Motion carried. The Senate is in recess.
The Senate will come to order. Reports of standing committees, the clerk will read.
Mr. President, the Committee on Federal and State Affairs recommends SCR 1611 be amended and the resolution be adopted as amended. Senator Alley, chairperson. Mr. President, the Committee on Federal and State Affairs recommends HB 2264 be passed. Senator Alley, chairperson. Mr. President, your Committee on Federal and State Affairs begs leave to submit the following report. The following appointments were referred to and considered by the committee, and your committee recommends that the Senate approve and consent to such appointments. By the Governor, Member, Kansas Human Rights Commission, Nathan Spriggs, Alicia Sanchez, Senator Alley, chairperson. Mr. President, the Committee on Judiciary recommends SB 286 be amended by substituting a new bill to be designated as substitute for Senate Bill number 286 as follows, and the substitute bill be passed. Senator Warren, chairperson. The Committee on Assessment and Taxation recommends HB 2313 be amended by substituting a new bill to be designated as Senate substitute for House Bill number 2313, and the substitute bill be passed. Senator Tyson, chairperson.
Any announcements? Without objection, the Senate is adjourned until 10 a.m. on Tuesday, May 4th, 2021. Seeing none, The Senate is adjourned.